There are some men who do not walk away because they stopped loving you. They walk away because the love became too deep for them to handle. And today, I want you to listen carefully. Because a man who truly loves you may keep his distance because of one powerful reason. A reason so quiet and so hidden that most people spend their lives misunderstanding it. Maybe you have felt it before. The silence, the coldness, the unexpected distance from someone whose eyes once looked at you as if you were the answer to a prayer they never knew how to say out loud. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you understand love, fear, and the human heart. There is a kind of love that does not stay calm. A kind of love so intense that it shakes the very foundation of a man's identity. Most people believe that love always brings two people closer together. But psychology tells us something different. Sometimes the deepest love creates distance before it creates closeness. Sometimes a man becomes emotionally unavailable, not because his feelings became weaker, but because they became stronger than he expected. Carl Jung spoke about the shadow, the hidden part of the human mind that holds fear, insecurity, pain, and unspoken emotions. When a man truly falls in love, not only with someone's appearance or attraction, but with the essence of who they are, something inside him begins to awaken. His hidden fears rise to the surface, his old wounds begin speaking again, and suddenly he is no longer fighting the world around him. He is fighting himself. Many men spend most of their lives learning how to survive, rather than learning how to feel. From a young age, they are often taught to stay strong, to hide weakness, to control emotion, to avoid vulnerability. As a result, when real love enters their life, it does not simply touch their heart. It reaches places they have spent years protecting. It uncovers wounds they thought were long buried. It exposes fears they never wanted anyone to see. A woman may think he became distant because he lost interest. But sometimes the truth is much more complicated. He became distant because being close to her made him feel too much. The one trait that often creates this distance is emotional intensity. Not her beauty, not her words, not even the relationship itself. It is the strength of what he feels when he is around her. That feeling becomes difficult to control, and that loss of control frightens him. A man who loves deeply is often not afraid of losing the woman. He is afraid of losing the version of himself he has always known. Some people enter your life and make you feel comfortable. Their presence feels familiar and predictable. But every once in a while, someone enters your life and touches something much deeper. Without trying, they reach hidden places inside your heart. Places you rarely show to anyone. When a man experiences this kind of connection, everything begins to feel different. His thoughts become louder. His emotions become stronger. His fears become sharper. Every message feels important. Every silence feels meaningful. Every possibility of rejection feels painful. Instead of moving closer, he starts pulling back. Many people misunderstand this reaction. They see distance and assume there is no love. But often, the opposite is true. A man who feels nothing can remain casual. He can keep things simple. He can walk away without much struggle. But a man who genuinely loves becomes emotionally exposed. And emotional exposure is terrifying for someone who has spent years hiding behind invisible walls. This is why some men appear colder after falling deeply in love. The feelings did not disappear. The feelings became harder to manage. They begin overthinking every conversation. They replay every interaction in their mind. They worry about saying the wrong thing. They worry about revealing too much. They worry about needing someone more than they should. Without realizing it, they begin creating emotional distance as a form of self-protection. There is a painful truth hidden inside many men's hearts. The deeper they love, the more vulnerable they become. And vulnerability is something many of them were never taught how to handle. The world praises strong men, confident men, fearless men. But very few people teach men how to manage a love that keeps them awake at night. Very few teach them how to carry emotions that suddenly feel larger than themselves. Very few teach them how to deal with the fear of losing someone who has become deeply important to them. So they choose distance. They choose silence. They choose withdrawal. Not because it feels good, but because it feels safer. Sometimes a man disappears for a while because he is trying to regain emotional balance. He sits alone, replaying conversations. He wonders why one person affects him so deeply. He questions why her presence can bring him peace and anxiety at the same time. The stronger the connection becomes, the more he worries about how much power it holds over his emotions. This is why intense love often creates confusion before it creates understanding. The heart recognizes the connection quickly, but the mind becomes afraid of everything that connection might change. Many men carry old emotional wounds. Some experienced betrayal, some experienced rejection, some experienced abandonment. Others grew up feeling unseen, unheard, or emotionally neglected. Those wounds do not disappear when love arrives. In many cases, real love brings them back to the surface. When someone truly matters, old fears become active again. The fear of rejection becomes louder. The fear of not being enough becomes stronger. The fear of emotional pain becomes harder to ignore. So instead of opening up completely, they create space. They tell themselves they need time. They convince themselves they need clarity. But often they are trying to escape the intensity of what they feel. The human mind has a strange habit. We often run from the things we want most. Jung believed that what we refuse to face within ourselves continues to influence us from the shadows. For many men, deep love awakens internal battles they never expected. They may appear calm on the outside while carrying emotional chaos within. They may seem emotionally distant while thinking about the same woman every day. They may act unaffected while secretly carrying feelings that shape their entire inner world. This contradiction confuses many relationships, because what someone shows externally is not always a reflection of what they feel internally. Sometimes the quietest people are carrying the loudest emotions, and sometimes the greatest distance is created by the deepest love. Success begins to feel incomplete without her. Even during his quiet moments, his mind drifts back to her. Her presence follows him through ordinary days. A song reminds him of her. A familiar place reminds him of her. Even moments of achievement feel less meaningful because he wishes she were there to share them. But because emotional intensity frightens him, he keeps these feelings hidden. He convinces himself that distance will help him regain control. He fears that if he reveals how deeply attached he has become, he may lose control over emotions he has spent years trying to manage. Perhaps that is one of the deepest truths hidden inside this entire discussion. Real love changes people. It is not simply romance, it is transformation. It forces hidden wounds to rise to the surface. It reveals insecurities that have been buried for years. It challenges the illusion that we can remain completely independent and untouched by others. Many people expect love to bring excitement, passion, and happiness. What they do not expect is the emotional challenge that often comes with it. They do not expect fear. They do not expect confusion. They do not expect old wounds to return. They do not expect the vulnerability that genuine emotional connection demands. Sometimes, the strongest men become emotionally fragile when they experience real love. Not because they are weak, because authentic intimacy removes the protective layers they have built around themselves. Behind every wall is a human being who wants to be understood. Behind every shield is someone who wants acceptance without judgment. Many men were never taught how to express emotional overwhelm in healthy ways. As a result, they often communicate through actions rather than words. Instead of explaining how deeply they care, they become distant. Instead of admitting their fears, they become quiet. Instead of expressing their attachment, they withdraw. The feelings remain, only the expression changes. If you have ever loved someone like this, then you understand how painful it can feel. One moment, the connection feels powerful and undeniable. The next moment, they seem emotionally far away. Their energy communicates one thing, their actions communicate another. This contradiction creates confusion. It leaves questions unanswered. It creates emotional uncertainty. But human beings are complicated. Our actions do not always reflect our deepest emotions. Fear changes behavior. Trauma changes behavior. Shame changes behavior. Past experiences shape the way people express love. Some people respond to love by moving closer. Others respond by pulling away. Both reactions are often rooted in fear. Fear is powerful. Fear can convince someone that emotional distance equals safety. Fear can create walls where connection should exist. Fear can silence words that desperately want to be spoken. Yet fear also creates loneliness. The human heart was never designed to remain disconnected forever. Deep inside, most people want the same things. They want to be seen. They want to be understood. They want to be accepted. They want to be loved without pretending to be someone else. There are quiet moments late at night when a man who loves deeply sits alone with emotions he cannot fully explain. His thoughts return to her. He remembers her laughter. He remembers the energy she brought into a room. He remembers how different life felt when she was near. Again and again, he replays old conversations. He wonders whether he should reach out. He wonders whether he should remain silent. Part of him wants to reconnect. Part of him wants to protect himself. Inside that struggle, he experiences more emotional pain than most people realize. Because suppressing emotions does not remove them, it only hides them temporarily. The feelings remain inside. Over time, they can become anxiety. They can become restlessness. They can become regret. They can become emotional exhaustion. Many emotionally distant men are not emotionally empty. They are emotionally overwhelmed. There is a major difference between those two things. An emotionally empty person feels very little. An emotionally overwhelmed person feels too much. The problem is not a lack of emotion. The problem is an inability to manage the intensity of those emotions. When someone lacks healthy emotional tools, distance often becomes their coping mechanism. They retreat because they do not know what else to do. They disappear because their fears become louder than their ability to communicate. The love does not disappear. The fear simply takes control. This is why emotional intelligence is so important. Without self-awareness, love becomes confusing. Without honesty, relationships become unstable. Without healing, old wounds begin influencing new relationships. A man who has not faced his inner fears may unknowingly damage the connection he values most. Not because he wants to cause pain, not because he enjoys creating distance, but because part of him is still trying to protect himself from emotional pain that has not even happened. The mind often prepares for disasters that may never arrive, and while doing so, it sometimes destroys opportunities for genuine happiness. Yet despite all of this, there is still something beautiful hidden inside emotionally intense love. It reminds us that the soul is still alive. It reminds us that human connection still has the power to transform people. In a world where many relationships have become superficial, real emotional depth remains rare. It remains meaningful. It remains powerful. It remains sacred. Yes, it can be frightening. Yes, it can be complicated. But it also reveals the deepest parts of who we are. When someone awakens both love and fear within you, it means they have touched something deeper than surface attraction. They have reached a place inside you that few people ever reach. The problem begins when this process is misunderstood. Many women spend years blaming themselves for a man's emotional distance. They question their value. They question their attractiveness. They question whether they were enough. But often the distance has very little to do with them. Sometimes they awakened emotions so deep that the man did not know how to handle them. Instead of learning how to navigate those emotions, he ran from them. Instead of growing through the experience, he avoided it. That does not mean emotional distance should always be accepted. Healthy love still requires communication. It still requires effort. It still requires accountability. It still requires emotional presence. Pain does not excuse harmful behavior. Fear does not justify neglect. But understanding the psychology behind emotional withdrawal allows us to view people with greater compassion. Not every distant person is cold-hearted. Not every silent person lacks love. Some are simply carrying wounds they never learned how to heal. There is a deep loneliness inside many men that society rarely acknowledges. For years, they are taught how to achieve. They are taught how to compete. They are taught how to survive. But very few are taught how to express vulnerability without shame. Very few are taught how to discuss emotional pain openly. Very few are taught how to ask for support when they need it. So when deep love enters their life, it collides with years of emotional conditioning. One part of them wants to surrender completely to the connection. Another part desperately tries to maintain control. This internal conflict creates the distance that confuses so many relationships. You may notice that men who love deeply often continue caring from afar. They remain emotionally connected even when physical distance exists. They wonder how you are doing. They hope you are okay. They think about reaching out more often than they admit. Authentic emotional bonds do not disappear easily. The soul remembers what the mind tries to suppress. Real connection leaves lasting marks on the human heart. Long after the relationship changes, the emotional imprint often remains. But there is an even deeper lesson hidden beneath all of this. Love by itself is not enough when fear controls the relationship. Emotional depth without emotional courage eventually becomes self-sabotage. At some point, every person must choose. They must decide whether fear will continue controlling their actions, or whether they will develop the courage required for genuine intimacy. Because love cannot survive forever inside silence. Truth eventually needs a voice. Vulnerability eventually needs expression. Emotional walls eventually need to come down. Otherwise, even the deepest connection slowly suffocates beneath everything left unsaid. Maybe you have spent nights wondering why someone who clearly cared about you became distant. Maybe their eyes revealed affection while their actions created confusion. Maybe their silence hurt more than direct rejection ever could. If so, remember this. People reveal their level of emotional healing through the way they handle love. Some communicate, some withdraw, some fight for connection, some run from it. Each response tells a story about the struggles taking place inside them. A healed man understands that vulnerability is not weakness. He understands that emotional openness requires courage. He communicates instead of disappearing. He remains present instead of hiding behind silence. But a wounded man often mistakes emotional intensity for danger. The more deeply he feels, the more threatened he becomes by his own vulnerability. Until he confronts those fears, he may continue repeating the same patterns, even with the people he loves most. Life has a strange way of bringing us face to face with connections that reveal our deepest truths. Some people enter our lives not only to love us, but to awaken us. They reveal the fears we still carry. They expose the wounds we still avoid. They challenge us to grow beyond old limitations. And while that process can be painful, it can also be transformative. Because emotional growth begins the moment emotional avoidance ends. The truth is that many people are starving for deep connection while simultaneously fearing it. They crave intimacy, but fear vulnerability. They desire love, but fear abandonment. They want understanding, but hide their authentic emotions. This contradiction creates much of the suffering people experience in relationships. We build walls hoping they will protect us. Then we discover those same walls have become emotional prisons. If a man truly loves you deeply, his distance is rarely simple. Beneath that distance there is often longing, there is fear, there is confusion, there is emotional overwhelm. There are unresolved wounds. There are silent battles taking place beneath the surface that few people ever see. And sometimes the greatest struggle is not whether love exists, it is whether fear will continue standing in the way of expressing it. This does not mean you should spend your life chasing someone who refuses to grow. It does not mean you should lose yourself trying to heal wounds that only they can heal. But it does mean that human behavior is often far more complex than it appears on the surface. Sometimes the coldest silence hides the deepest emotions. Sometimes the greatest distance hides the strongest attachment. And perhaps that is what makes love both heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. Every person carries an invisible story. Stories shaped by childhood experiences, old disappointments, broken trust, painful memories, and insecurities they rarely share with anyone. Most of these struggles remain hidden beneath the surface. People learn how to smile while carrying pain. They learn how to appear strong while feeling uncertain. They learn how to function normally while carrying emotional burdens nobody else can see. Then love arrives, and suddenly those hidden places are touched all at once. The fears become visible. The wounds become active. The emotions become impossible to ignore. Some people respond by growing stronger. They choose honesty. They choose courage. They choose emotional openness. Others respond by retreating. They hide behind fear. They create distance. They avoid the very connection they secretly desire. But no matter how someone responds, love has a way of revealing the truth about who they are beneath the masks they show the world. One day, a man who spent years running from emotional intensity may finally understand something important. He may realize that love was never the problem. Deep feelings were never the enemy. Vulnerability was never weakness, and emotional openness was never something to fear. When that realization finally arrives, he may begin looking back on his life differently. He may remember the people he pushed away. He may remember the moments he chose silence instead of honesty. He may remember the opportunities for connection that disappeared because fear made the decisions instead of love. And for the first time, he may fully understand the pain that distance created. Because emotional avoidance does not truly protect anyone. It only postpones healing. It delays growth. It delays understanding. And sometimes it delays happiness itself. The soul does not long for shallow connections. It does not crave temporary distractions. Deep inside, people want something more meaningful. They want truth. They want emotional presence. They want authenticity. They want the freedom to be fully seen without feeling ashamed of who they are. The people who change our lives are rarely the ones who simply entertained us for a moment. They are the ones who challenged us emotionally. They are the ones who awakened something sleeping inside us. They are the ones who showed us how deeply we can feel. They are the ones who forced us to face parts of ourselves we had been avoiding for years. That is why certain connections stay with us long after they end. Their impact reaches beyond ordinary attraction. Their presence becomes part of our personal growth. Their influence remains long after the circumstances change. So if someone once loved you deeply but kept their distance, do not immediately assume it was because you lacked value. Do not assume you were unworthy. Do not assume you were not enough. Sometimes the situation had very little to do with your worth. Sometimes you simply touched parts of their heart that they were not prepared to face. Sometimes your presence awakened emotions they had spent years trying to suppress. Sometimes your connection became so powerful that it challenged everything they thought they understood about themselves. And rather than learning how to handle those emotions, they escaped from them. Distance felt easier than vulnerability. Silence felt easier than honesty. Avoidance felt easier than emotional risk. But easy choices rarely create meaningful relationships. And that leads to the final truth hidden inside this entire conversation. Love reaches its highest form when people choose growth over fear, not when they endlessly trigger each other's wounds, not when they hide behind emotional walls, not when they allow old pain to control new relationships. Real love requires courage. It requires the courage to communicate honestly. It requires the courage to remain emotionally present when things become difficult. It requires the courage to face uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them. It requires the courage to stay open even when fear whispers that distance would be safer. Because every meaningful relationship eventually asks the same question. Will fear make the decision, or will love? In the end, the greatest tragedy is not loving someone deeply. The greatest tragedy is allowing fear to silence a love that had the power to transform your life. Right now, somewhere in the world, there are people separated not by a lack of love, but by an inability to express it. There are hearts that still care. There are souls that still remember. There are people pretending they feel nothing while carrying emotions too deep to explain. There are conversations that never happened. There are truths that were never spoken. There are connections waiting for courage to replace fear. And perhaps that is why this message found you today. Perhaps some part of you needed this reminder. Perhaps you needed to understand that human emotions are rarely simple. Perhaps you needed to remember that love and fear often exist side by side inside the same heart. A man who loves deeply may sometimes create distance because the emotional intensity feels overwhelming. The connection awakens both love and fear at the same time. It challenges his sense of control. It exposes his vulnerabilities. It forces him to face parts of himself he may have avoided for years. But the deepest connections in life are not meant to be escaped from. They are meant to teach. They are meant to transform. They are meant to heal. And the people who find lasting love are often the ones who finally discover that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing connection even when fear is present. Because healing begins the moment we stop running from our hearts and start listening to them instead.